We're all just kids walking around pretending to be adults, triggering reactions in each other. I trigger you, you trigger me. We're a never-ending game of trauma tennis. It's a worry of a lot of people that suffer with childhood trauma. They make an unconscious decision sometimes to not be a parent because they're scared they're going to be like their parents. It was one of the most difficult but freeing things I've ever done. Once I'd intellectualized and understood and my father had passed away, finally I'm at a point where I have to decide the legacy that I want to leave behind. We spend a long period of our time thinking that when we get here, we'll do this. When we're growing up, we'll do that. You don't realize sometimes that you're on the other side of that now. You don't have as much time as you thought you did. Hello and welcome to the Johnny Lawrence podcast. Today, I'm going to be a bit more self-indulgent than I'd usually be, and I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, but I'm going to do it for a reason, because I've been going through a very unique situation recently. And just like I always do when I have these unique situations going on in my life, I sat down with myself and tried to make sense of it. And I had this epiphany where I realized what was going on. Anyway, ruining the episode here. I think it probably starts with me recognizing something, and that is that I call myself the self-development coach. And I just want to make sure and hope that nobody, for any reason, takes that as I've got it all figured out, that I sit in a position where I think that I'm better than you and that I know more than you and that I don't make mistakes anymore and that my life is perfect, because that is not true. That is not even a little bit true. I'm you. And that's what this podcast is about. Yes, I have learned a lot of things. I'd be lying to you if I said I hadn't learned a lot of things. But the truth of it is, a lot of those things I have learned have been through making mistakes. I've done loads and loads and loads of courses. At some point, I was called a course collector. I've educated myself to a higher level, read a lot of books, spent a lot of time on the podcast talking to very knowledgeable people. And now I'm very fortunate enough to spend time with people whom I used to only dream about spending time with in my industry, obviously, who've got loads of knowledge. So I recognize that I've got all of that, but really the mistakes that I made are what serve as one of the greatest reminders of what not to do. Because I have got a history just like everybody else where I'm frustrated that I messed up that relationship, or I'm disappointed that it didn't work out with that job, or I'm baffled. I have an uncomfortable emotion around that friendship that's no longer in my life. And on some cases, I made mistakes, and it's been a lifelong plight of mine to try and work out where I made that mistake so that I don't make it again. Also, other people made mistakes, and they're not always going to take responsibility for that. And I have to work out where I can influence the situation, what I need to do on my side, and how I can influence that situation by basically accepting it. And they're going to take responsibility for their part of things, and they don't. And that's okay. I have to accept that. So I'm disappointed at how things didn't work out, but I try my hardest to learn from those things. But the truth of it is, I'm going to use the word trauma, but I want you to understand that there are varying degrees of trauma. There are some things to some people that say, oh, that's not traumatic, but it is. It was to them. It's what meaning you made from that event that happened in your life, because we're all just kids walking around pretending to be adults, basically triggering each other. We're all walking around the place, triggering reactions in each other. I trigger you, you trigger me, and if we're not careful, before you know it, we're in a never-ending game of trauma tennis. And it just goes on and on and on and on. And the goal in life, I've realized, is to learn about ourselves. Is to learn about the meanings that we've made behind the events in our lives and the things that have happened in our lives. So during this episode, I'm going to be talking about something that's happening in real time. But before that, I'm going to talk a little bit about something I call the Developing Stairway, which is a little section of my book that I'm going to be talking about in this episode as well. Let's start at the beginning. When I was a PT, I used to get a lot of people come to me and they would say they will know when they've achieved their goal. They will know when they're getting to where they want to go, when they can go for a jog. They've always wanted to jog, but they've never been able to get there because they've always felt that they're too overweight and it hurts this and it hurts that and they don't know how to do it and they don't feel confident and there's all these things standing in the way. And they feel that if they can lose a little bit of weight, that they can learn to jog. And one of the things I used to do is I used to take them to a place where there were lots of lampposts. And here in Cornwall, I use a place called Gillenvays Beach. And along the seafront, there's all these lampposts that are reasonably distanced apart, not too far, but not too close. And I used to walk with them. One of the first things I'd do with someone, depending on the sort of weight they were looking to lose, if they felt they were really, really heavy and they had quite a lot of weight to lose, we would just walk down the seafront and we would talk and we would walk. And sometimes I'd pick up the pace and ask them to match me and they would do that. But eventually we get to a point where from one lamppost to another, I'd get them to do a very, very light jog. And sometimes that would be exhausting for them and we'd have to walk or rest for a little while. But over time, we'd build it up where we'd jog from one lamppost and walk to the next. Jog from one lamppost, walk to the next. And then a little while later, we'd start going, okay, well, maybe we run 2 lampposts. And over time, we'd build this up. We'd build it up slowly over time. And each lamppost represented almost like a goal line. It was something that was being achieved in small, manageable, easy bite-sized tasks. But eventually, what it would end up with was one day, I'd go, right, let's see if we can jog the whole thing. And we'd jog from one end of the street, and this is a long street, one end of the street to the other, all the way down. And then it would be all the way down and all the way back. Then maybe we'd do it twice. And eventually I would remind them, do you remember when you first came to me all them months ago and you said to me that the biggest thing that you would ever like to achieve is to go for a jog? You're jogging. Well done. And then sometimes those people would enter races, 5Ks, and they would start to up the ante, but always seemingly forgetting that at some point they were just that person who was wishing, praying, not believing that one day that they could be that person that could go for a jog. And this is where the Developing Stairway comes in. It's my way of explaining how you change when you start to develop yourself. The way I see it is, in the beginning, we're all standing on the ground floor. We all look out from the ground floor and we all say, that's a bush, that's a tree, that's a wall, that's a stream. We all look around and we all agree on what we can see. We're all on the same level and we can all see the same thing and we all agree and we all understand each other. Everything is fine. There's nobody stressed, no one thinking they're better than each other. Everything is all right. And then you decide that you want to go to step 1. So you climb up onto step 1. And that's okay, because you can see a little bit more of the tree than the person on the ground floor can see, but it's not so indescribable that the person on the ground floor doesn't think, well, it's okay, you can see the tops of the trees, but I'm sure it just looks like the rest of the tree and it's fine. Everybody's comfortable still. Then you go to step 2. And maybe you go to step 3. And let me just make it clear at this point that no matter how high you climb on this stairway, it doesn't mean that you're better than anyone else. It's not even what you're trying to be. It's that you get a different perspective than the people that are on the lower steps. But at some point, you get to this point where it doesn't matter how articulate you are, how passionate you are, how much you try, how much effort you put in. It doesn't matter how you explain what you can see to the person on the ground floor. It doesn't matter how much you do that. They just have no way of understanding. You can see waterfalls, you can see mountains, you can see the sun on the horizon, but they've never seen any of that before. And because they've never seen it, they don't even want to. They're not bothered. In fact, all that you're doing by talking to them about what you can see is frustrating them. All you're starting to do is make them feel resentful because you're talking about something they can't relate to, that they can't understand. And you're making them feel a bit stupid. And then they start to create a meaning from that based off of the things that have happened to them in the past, perhaps, where they start to think that you think you're better than them. And it becomes this resentment and dissension and things don't quite feel right. This is what happens when we develop ourselves as we move up. And because we're so passionate, because we love where we are and we've learned so many wonderful things that have changed our life and helped us and made us feel better about ourselves and the world around us, we stop short of begging these people on these lower steps. They don't have any way of understanding us and they don't want to. So we beg them to come up to our step and they don't want to. And here's the thing, it's absolutely fine that they don't want to. And it's absolutely fine that you do. And there comes this point where we have to realize, we have to accept that that person isn't going to follow us on that journey and that the nature of our relationship has changed a little bit. And that's okay. It's tough. It's difficult. But if we stop begging them and talking about that thing, because they'll get to the point where they'll wait for it. They're like, oh, here we go. It's going to start talking about this. And I did it. I did it with alcohol. I did it with self-development. Sometimes I give advice when I've not been asked. I work on that and I try not to do it anymore. But there are times where I get excited because I think, oh, I know the answer to that problem, but not everybody wants the answer. Sometimes they just want to talk about it. And as I've seen through coaching, the best way for someone to come to a conclusion is through them working out for themselves. That might mean that they have to fail at something. That might mean they have to experience something difficult, but they will learn it for themselves if they want to. So why is this important? Why is this a helpful analogy? Well, the first thing is that it's about understanding that self-development is about gaining new perspectives. It's not always about changing. It's about realizing that the only way that you can know something or realize something is when you get that different perspective. Sometimes you have to experience those things in life that you're scared of. The thing that you're looking for is found in the thing that you're avoiding, the thing that you're scared of. Sometimes we have to realize that it's in those experiences, and only in those experiences will we get to what we need in order to move forward. And that's really difficult to understand and accept, but it's very relevant to my later story that I'm going to tell in a minute, the whole reason for this podcast. The other thing as well is something I've learned to call philosophical loneliness. And I've learned that from one of my mentors, Maliki Dunn. And it's the idea that we can be in a room full of people and we can still feel lonely. We can still feel like no one relates to us. We can still feel like we can't talk about the things that we talk about. You might be somebody that gets excited by ideas and exploring things. You don't necessarily need the answers all the time. You just enjoy talking about it. You like talking about books that you've read and programs you've watched and things that you've discovered and learned. And you like it when the other person knows a little bit about it and has got something else to share with you. And there's this really wonderfully engaging conversation that lights you up. And then sometimes you go to an event and the other person wants to talk about a reality TV show that they've watched and you don't. And that's tough. And you just feel really alone. And before you know it, you feel like you can't talk about things. You can't get excited about ideas because people mock you or ridicule you or tell you you're crazy or tell you you're a dreamer or whatever. So you just silence yourself and you stop talking and you start to feel lonely and things start to feel like they're wrong and you feel disconnected from your friendship circle. And this is because you're climbing that stairway. And the point I'm trying to make there is that on that staircase is other people like you. You can turn to your left, you can turn to your right, and you can go, hey, my name's Johnny. Nice to meet you. What are you into? What are you here for at this conference? What are you here for at this book launch? What are you here for at this thing that we're standing here or cafe or whatever? What are you doing here? Have a conversation. Make new friends who are on the same step as you because it's so exciting. It really is. It's nice to be able to have those conversations and to have somebody that actually understands you from your perspective. But here's the part that's really important. Each one of those steps is like a level in a computer game. And at the end of every level in a computer game is a boss that you've got to defeat. Somebody that puts into practice all of the things that you've learned in that level and make sure that it wasn't just luck that you got to the end of the level, that you've really learned those skills, those lessons that are part of level 1, level 2, level 3. And that boss tests you on all of those skills. And if you pass, what's really important to understand is that if you pass, if you defeat that boss on step 1, if you defeat that boss on step 2, you deserve to be on the next level. And that is what I've had to learn recently. I've had to learn that the level that I'm on, I deserve to be here. And I've learned that in lots of different ways. I've learned that if I'm judging myself on how others show up, then I'm doing myself a disservice. I'm not doing myself justice because we're all here to forge our own path. We're all here to do things our way. If you're focusing on someone else, then they grow. Focus on the things that are important to you. Focus on your development. Develop your stairway. Take the steps when you're ready. Defeat the boss. Learn the lessons and recognize that you deserve to be where you are right now. Bit of self-talk going on there. Just point out. So what were my phases in my journey? Well, I think for a very long time, my childhood events, the things that my father did to me as a kid, were playing out in my life. And I didn't really realize that. When you grew up the way I grew up, and many others do, you don't necessarily know that that's not normal. And my way of dealing with all of the challenging emotions, my level 1, the boss that I had to defeat, was alcohol. Because I was using alcohol as a way of emotionally regulating, as a way of outsourcing my emotional regulation because I just wasn't able to do it for myself. And I had all of these very challenging emotions, PTSD, and all sorts of things that came up for me as an adult from my childhood. And my first boss was to make the decision to go sober, because it was only when I went sober was I able to feel the emotions I needed to feel, to explore the emotions, to look at the things and events that had happened in my life and to start to look at the meanings that I created about these things that have happened in my life so that I could then challenge them and I could look at them and make the decision to look at them a different way. And it was only then, when I gave up alcohol, did I even realize that my childhood wasn't normal, wasn't conventional, wasn't typical, and that a lot of damage had been done, both physically and psychologically, to me as a child, which then became level 2 for me, which was my father. making sense of the things that he did and helping myself realize and understand that what he did wasn't about me. It didn't mean that I was bad or I was wrong or that I needed to change as such. I could stop looking for his approval because I was never going to get it because he didn't know how to give it. And it was about me being able to let go of that. And then there was step 3 where I had to learn that I'm the father now, which was like a massive, yeah, that one was a hard one. And then I got to decide, or I had to decide, the type of father I wanted to be, how I wanted to show up. Did I want to continue to disappoint my boys because I couldn't let go of alcohol? Or did I want to disappoint my boys because I was finding it difficult to have relationships with them and the people around us? You know, when you have children, as people that are fortunate enough to be parents will know, that there are lots of opportunities to meet other parents and to do all of that and to swap tips and to cry together when it gets really hard and you're not getting any sleep. I had to decide what type of father I was going to be and how I was going to do that. So throughout all of those times, I had a boss I had to defeat and I had to learn the difficult lessons along the way. When I gave up alcohol, I had to learn that I had to explore my feelings and my emotions and allow my feelings and emotions to come to the surface instead of using an emotional Gaviscon that was alcohol. That's an anti-acid here in the UK for listeners abroad. And then level 2 was to address the meanings that I'd put behind the things that my father had done, so that I didn't allow him to dominate the rest of my life and to teach me that I'm worthless and that I'm not good enough and that I'm a failure and that I'll never amount to anything, which were all the lessons that he taught me as a kid. And then I had to decide at level 3 that I was never going to be that type of father. It's a worry of a lot of people that suffer with childhood trauma from a parent, is that they make an unconscious decision sometimes to not be a parent because they're scared they're going to be like their parents or their parent. So I had to make that decision. But really, the decision I'm at now, the thing that's made me realize that all of this stuff is so important is finally I'm at a point where I have to decide the legacy that I want to leave behind. That when my father died just recently, it was a real reminder of the fragility of life and that we don't get as long as we think we've got. We spend a long period of our time at the beginning of our life thinking that when we get here, we'll do this. When we're growing up, we'll do that. You don't realize sometimes that you're on the other side of that now and that you don't have as much time as you thought you did. And I saw that in my father. When I looked through a lot of his writings, I realized there was a guy, somewhere within them writings was a man who was chasing something that he never quite ever achieved. And that was a real reminder to me. So what do I want to achieve? What's my legacy going to be? And throughout all of this, I've been writing this book. And at first I wrote 90,000 words. And in these 90,000 words, when I started writing about some of the traumatic events that I had been through, it was like I unlocked these memories. And I just wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote about in quite a lot of detail about the things that had happened to me as a child. And when I'd read it back, sometimes the things I'd written didn't really make sense. And I'd realized that my memories were quite confused and jumbled. That's where recently I've been doing EMDR to straighten out that timeline and to make sense of things. And in some cases, some of the memories were a little bit worse than I thought they'd be. And in some cases, they weren't quite at all what I thought they were. And in other cases, this is wild, I'd actually adopted a memory of one of my brothers or sisters and thought it was me, which is just really like took me by surprise, you know? I think sometimes we think that our memories are like this little movie that we play over and over again in our head, and every time we look at it, it's the same, but it's not. It's more like a canvas that every time we look at it, we paint a little bit on it and we change it ever so slightly. And we have to be careful of that because quite a lot of the time we create these narratives that we'd rather be true instead of the thing that is true in order to make us feel like we can continue to move forward, which is very understandable, but it's not the truth, which is what becomes difficult. I thought I'd got the book finished. I'd written 90,000 words, and coincidentally, 2 really quite big publishers reached out to me and asked to take a look at the book. And we went through quite a long, arduous process of them examining the book, looking through the book, trying to make it work and make it fit and all of these different things. They asked of me certain things that I wasn't willing to do, and it didn't work out. But there was one in particular that made the recommendation that I needed to take out quite a few of the stories of my childhood. And at the time, I didn't want to because I'd just written them. They were quite raw. And what I didn't realize is that those stories weren't the book. They wasn't the book. That was almost like journaling. Those stories need to come out. You can intellectualize your trauma. You can speak about your trauma. But when you write it down, it has this very different impact. I can't explain it. It's something worth trying if you feel brave enough. And I'm really glad that I wrote those things down. But that element of what the publisher said, they were right. Because in a sense, it was a metaphor for my life. I needed to let go of those experiences. And just like I let go of alcohol, when I let go of alcohol, It was one of the most difficult but freeing things I've ever done. And once I'd intellectualized and understood the stuff around my father, and my father had passed away, it was a real opportunity to let go of that too. And all of a sudden, I cut 30,000 words from the book, and I reread the book. I have to be careful because this does make me feel emotional a little bit. And it's incredible. I'm so incredibly proud of this book. It's everything I wanted it to be. It's everything I've learned. It doesn't hearken people back to trauma. It doesn't remind them of all the horrible things I've been through. I do talk about some of those things, but only when they're relevant. But the things I have learned the hard way so that others don't have to is all in this book. And I'm so incredibly proud. And I'm really proud to say that I haven't signed the contract yet, but I think I found a publisher. And I think that this book's going to come into the world. And that's why this whole Developing Stairway is so important to me, because it requires me to go to the next level. It requires me to defeat that final boss, that boss of exposure, that little part of me, that remnants of my father that's still there saying you're making a fool of yourself, that you don't know what you're doing, you're not this, you're not that, you're this, you're that, you're worthless, you're all of these different things. It's there. But now I get to defeat that boss finally, and I'm sure it will come back in a different form. It tends to do that. But now here I am about to release a book, and I'm going to be brave about it. And I'm going to say that I'm going to need your help, because through this whole publisher journey, I'm doing it in such a way that I can take you guys on it with me. Because like I said to you, I'm one of you guys. I'm not somebody that thinks I'm perfect. I'm not a narcissist masquerading as a coach. I am the real deal. Going to pay for that remark. I am the real deal. I've helped enough people now. I get messages from people saying that the podcast episode they listened to stopped them from taking their own lives. And that's a privilege. It really is. So now I feel like it's a moral obligation for me to put this book out there, to continue to do my work, to push as hard as I can to get this message that I've got out into the world, because it's so, so important. We're all just messy humans failing our way to success, and we all learn these little lessons. We climb the stairway. We go from the ground floor to step 1 to step 2. And the whole point of it is to gain a different perspective. The whole point of it is to enjoy the adventure, because you may never get to the top of the stairs. I'm not even sure there is a top of the stairs. And if there is, it's probably heaven, and I'm not sure you want to get there too early. So I need your help. I'm going to bring you along on this journey. And then hopefully, and I'll probably get told off for saying this, but hopefully by January, that book will be on the shelves and you'll be able to buy it. And when you read it, you'll read, about some of my life, but you'll also see yourself in that book. You'll also find these actionable, simple, easy ways to move yourself forward step by step. Because within each step is little micro steps, and you get closer and closer to the end of the step, and then you meet that boss and you get to go to the next step. And this is life. This is the way we move. And the made model's in there, and I can't wait to share it with you. So I don't know if that's been helpful at all, but it's been something that's been rattling around in my head. And sometimes I will use this podcast as a way to explore new ideas and to put things out there, and we'll see. You might go, what a load of waffle. But I just want to remind you that the self-made audit is in the description. Again, 12 questions that takes you through the made model. Really simple questions, but probably difficult answers that really, really will make a difference. And if you want to leave it there, you'll learn a lot just from that audit, and it's completely free. But then there's the self-made course that comes after that, if you really want to deepen that knowledge. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to the podcast today, and I'll see you next week for another episode of the Johnny Lawrence Podcast.